When the first colonists came to America, they found a fertile land forested with trees. Game was plentiful. Mockingbirds filled the air with song. The streams furnished plenty of fresh water and fish. They built crude shelters and, enduring severe hardships, stayed to found a country. The first permanent English settlement was established in Jamestown in 1607. Once the proud capital of Virginia Territory, it was beset by erosion, fire, and floods. Today, all that remains is a few carefully preserved ruins, impressive in their simplicity. A cross marks the spot of the first landing. The ivy-covered bell tower of the old church remains. Serving also as a meeting house, the first representative government was formed here. The tree overgrowing a gravestone gives a feeling of antiquity. Glassblowing, an important colonial enterprise, is recreated by the National Park Service. Before the Pilgrims, who were seeking religious freedom, landed late in 1620, they signed the Mayflower Pact. This mutual agreement helped bind them together during the first severe winter, when they lost half of their number. Underneath this canopy lies Plymouth Rock. Mayflower II was recently built in England and repeated the voyage to Plymouth. 54 people were buried in this common grave the first winter. Burial Hill overlooks the harbor. Governor William Bradford's grave is marked by the flag. The 81-foot Pilgrim Memorial is described by a Harvard law student.
Now we have the landing of the Pilgrims. Contrary to common belief, the Pilgrims first landed at Provincetown. They found the water brackish and soil bad for farming, so they sent out 3 exploration parties, the third of which landed on Fox Island, that heavily wooded island out in the harbor with a White House on it.
This fine marble statue honors a Pilgrim mother. A descendant of Priscilla Alden still lives in Plymouth's oldest building, the Sparrow House, and has a ceramic studio in the basement. Gloucester, a picturesque city on Cape Ann, has been an important fishing center since colonial days. This famous statue, erected on the 300th anniversary of the founding of the city, commemorates 8,000 inhabitants who have been lost at sea. At the beginning of the season, the fleet is blessed, and the floral wreaths are cast into the harbor. A row of sea captains' homes face the ocean. Here a widow's walk is plainly visible. Fishing vessels sail from the capes of Virginia to Greenland, Iceland, and the Newfoundland banks. Life in Gloucester has been described in many books, the most famous, Kipling's Captains Courageous. We visit an independent fish processing plant. Ocean perch accounts for 70% of the total catch. The remainder of the fish is sent outside by a conveyor and dumped. This process is carefully watched by the sidewalk superintendent. The Whaling Museum at New Bedford, Connecticut contains the world's largest ship model, big enough to go aboard. This fine eagle figurehead came from the bow of one of New Bedford's last whalers, the Wanderer, wrecked in 1924. When the lookout yelled, "Thar she blows," the harpoon was thrown with 1,300 feet of line attached. On the return voyage, the crew carved whale's teeth. They were called scrimshaw, and many were articles of great beauty. Recognizing the need for higher education, a Mr. Harvard gave half of his estate in 1636 to found Harvard College. Emerson Hall is being renovated inside, but the vine-covered walls remain the same. He once wrote, "If eyes were made for seeing, then beauty is its own excuse for being." Salem, Massachusetts is one of the oldest and most historic sites in New England. The witchcraft scare began in 1692. Inside the witch house, our guide explains.
During a period of 13 months, over 200 persons accused of witchcraft were brought to this house for preliminary hearings. They were held in the judge's chamber upstairs. Then they were sent to prison to await a final trial. 19 of the accused were convicted and hanged on Gallows Hill. 13 were women and 6 were men.
The Common at Concord is considered the birthplace of American liberty. The sign on this flagpole proclaims it. Here, General Parker, in 1775, told his men not to fire unless fired upon. But if they mean to have war, let it begin here. No one knows who fired the first shot, which is embedded in the side of a nearby house. Jonathan Harrington was wounded on the Common. He dragged himself to his home across the street and died at his wife's feet. Retreating, the Minutemen hid behind the stone fences and took potshots at the advancing redcoats. They stood their ground at Concord Bridge, which arched the flood. The familiar Minuteman statue commemorates the men who left their plows to defend freedom. The safest way to see Boston is in a Gray Line convertible bus. Downtown Boston is a curious mixture of the old and new buildings. An extensive urban renewal program is underway. Still, our bus must wind its way through many narrow streets that were once cow paths to the Boston Common. This old world type business sign reminds us of the Boston Tea Party. Paul Revere's home is a busy stop on the Freedom Trail. His love for simple beauty is reflected in his bedroom. He is best known for his midnight ride to Lexington and Concord. His statue is in the churchyard at Old North Church. The brickwork on the church is chipping a bit. The steeple that held the lantern that fateful night has been rebuilt 3 times. The original organ and chimes still play. The tower above Faneuil Hall has a grasshopper weather vane. The hall is the home of our first militia company. The monument at Bunker Hill marks the first decisive battle of the Revolution. To save precious ammunition, General Prescott ordered his men not to shoot till they saw the whites of their eyes. The U.S. frigate Constitution, nicknamed Old Ironsides, was saved for all to enjoy by pennies contributed by school children. She carried 52 guns and never was defeated in battle. We were surprised to see these Portuguese men of war, a form of jellyfish, performing near the gangplank. In the fall of 1777, 11,000 defeated, cold, and hungry troops camped at Valley Forge. Since this was close to Philadelphia, Washington was able to keep an eye on the British, who were comfortably quartered there. 900 crude huts designed by Washington were built to house the men. Washington headquarters was formerly the home of a Quaker family. 90% original, it is carefully preserved. The 2,000-acre compound was well fortified, never attacked. The ragged, often barefoot men marched in the snow on the parade ground. Here, with the help of General von Steuben, a strict disciplinarian, they formed the Continental Army. In the spring, they drove the British from Philadelphia and went on to ultimate victory. The National Memorial Arch honors the men who suffered here. There is also a non-sectarian memorial chapel. In the tower, there is a bell from each state in the Union, weighing from 15 pounds to 8 tons. The United States was created in Philadelphia on July 4, 1776, when the Continental Congress voted the final form of the Declaration of Independence. The Federal Convention met in Independence Hall in 1787 and drafted the Constitution. Washington sat in this chair as he presided. The Liberty Bell's traditional association with the events of the Revolution has made it one of the most venerable symbols of American freedom. The First Continental Congress met in Carpenter's Hall to protest Great Britain's American policies. Nearby is the home of Betsy Ross, who made the first flag with 13 stars. In Elfreth's Alley, we see the original cobblestone street, as it was in Franklin's day. The people who live here keep these old homes in good condition and are proud of the emblem of the Philadelphia Historical Commission. Seeking divine guidance, 7 signers of the Declaration of Independence worshipped here at Christ Church, built in 1725. This picture was taken from Washington's pew. Old Swedes Church is also a national shrine. The ivy-covered churchyard contains many old stones. The congregation sit beneath the model of a sailboat that brought their ancestors from Sweden. After 7 years of bitter fighting, Cornwallis surrendered at Yorktown, and the War for Independence was won. Thomas Jefferson, the main author of the Declaration of Independence, designed and helped build Monticello. It is high on a mountain in Virginia, overlooking the country he loved. In the museum is the pen he used. He's buried in a family plot on the estate. A contrast to the simple original ruins at Jamestown is the carefully restored city of Williamsburg, made possible by John D. Rockefeller, Jr. 77 buildings were restored, 189 reconstructed on their foundation, and 572 torn down. The capital of Virginia Territory was moved here from Jamestown in 1779. At one time, the area extended all the way to the Mississippi River. The Great Seal of England, which reads, Her Majesty Queen Anne, her royal capital. In this courtroom, Patrick Henry decried the Stamp Act and declared, Give me liberty or give me death. The Governor's Palace, residence of the royal governors, and one of the most elegant mansions in colonial America. There are extensive formal gardens and dependent buildings. Raleigh's Tavern was frequented by many young patriots. It was here also that Phi Beta Kappa was organized. At the magazine, authentic colonial arms are displayed. Several colonial crafts are demonstrated. This young man is carding flax. Inside, it is spun into linen. Fort McHenry was built to defend Baltimore, an important seaport. It was attacked by 16 British warships in a 25-hour battle during the War of 1812. During this bombardment, Francis Scott Key was inspired to write our national anthem. Surprisingly large, the original flag is displayed at the new Museum of History and Technology in Washington.
The mid-19th century is known as the golden age of great American writers. Within a few years and a few miles of each other, in the Boston area were born Emerson, Longfellow, Whittier, Holmes, and Hawthorne. These literary giants were all good friends. Emerson's grandfather, a Unitarian minister, lived in the Old Manse, a stone's throw from the Old North Church at Concord. Later, while Hawthorne lived here, his bride wrote tender messages on the window panes with her diamond ring. The interior is tastefully furnished in the colonial period. Ralph Waldo Emerson's home contains his extensive library. Seated in this chair, he wrote some of his essays concerning noble ideals, right conduct, and the dignity of man. These ideas formed the basis for the Transcendental movement, which held that men all had a spark of divinity within them. A graduate of the Harvard School of Divinity, he occasionally preached at the Unitarian Church in Concord. Henry David Thoreau, philosopher, naturalist, and writer, trod this path to his hut by Walden Pond. Here for 2 years he lived a hermit-like existence. The beauty of the area inspired vividly descriptive passages in the book Walden. A bronze plaque marks the site of the hut, which he built at a cost of $28. These crude rocks were the fireplace foundation, and stone pillars outline the dwelling. From his doorway he had this view of Walden Pond. In contrast to Thoreau's quiet existence, today on the far opposite shore is located a public beach. Orchard House, home of Louisa May Alcott, was the setting for Little Women. In the carriage house, the imaginative Louisa May and her 3 sisters produced plays, which were sometimes viewed by Emerson. In Salem is located the House of the Seven Gables, made famous by Hawthorne's novel. Appropriately, Hepzibah's scent shop is now a souvenir shop. Colonel Pynchon's portrait still dominates the room. To the right, the door to the secret stairs stands ajar. The parlor recalls the death scene of Judge Pynchon. The beamed ceiling and heavy furniture add to the somber mood of the story. Phoebe's room seems to reflect her cheerfulness. The posies in Phoebe's garden overlook the sea. In the evening, Hallgrave and Phoebe often met at Maule's well. Rooted before the door stands a tree of wide circumference, known as the Pynchon elm. Hawthorne's birthplace in Salem is next door to the House of the Seven Gables.
As early as the 1700s, some of the more hardy people grew tired of the crowded coastal cities and pushed westward into the mountains. They built their homes in the valleys. Happy in their new homes, they lived here for generations, almost forgotten by the rest of the country. Self-sufficient, they made their own tools from which they fashioned their crude homes and developed their own unique culture. Aunt Arlene Puckett, a midwife, lived to be 102. During her long life, she helped to bring hundreds of babies into the world, but none of her own 24 children lived beyond infancy. The Blue Ridge Parkway, nearly 500 miles long, follows the Appalachian Ridge and connects Great Smoky Mountain Park with Shenandoah National Park. At historic Harper's Ferry, the Potomac cuts through the mountains. It is joined here by the Shenandoah River. The town has been troubled by numerous floods, as indicated by the high water marks on the building to the left, the highest in 1936. Seated on this rock, Thomas Jefferson once remarked that it was worth an ocean voyage to look at the scene where the Potomac River cuts through the Blue Ridge. These stone piers at one time supported a covered railroad bridge. In 1849, John Brown's raiders captured the bridge watchman, stole across the river, and burned the federal arsenal. The rusty muskets still lie in the cellar, recently excavated through many layers of silt. When sectional passions exploded into bloody civil war, this strategic town changed hands several times. The old church was once a Union hospital. After 100 years, there is still antagonism in the South. The Pennsylvania Dutch, or more properly Deutsch, brought with them many of the old world customs from Germany. This is where they say, throw the cow over the fence, some hay. Their well-constructed barns are decorated by hex signs. This one displayed at the Kutztown Fair in Lancaster County. Many old-time crafts are demonstrated. Here this lady is making lye soap. The vehicles include an old-time hearse and a mail wagon. Of special interest to the men are these one-cylinder gasoline engines, still puffing away. An interested spectator is Uncle Bill Yeatle, whose picture is on the cover of the program.
One more question, then you go in the next room. And he says, this time I want the right answer. He says, for your parents, Russian. No, they took their time.
After a Dutch lunch with shoe fly pie for dessert, we drove to Hershey, Pennsylvania. Near the intersection of Cocoa Avenue and Chocolate Street, we found the street lights shaped like giant Hershey kisses. From the chocolate factory, the tempting odor of like cooking fudge permeated the whole town. The tour through the factory is an hour well spent. The manufacturing and packaging of cocoa products is explained by guides. The cocoa beans are stored in giant elevators. The hulls form an unusual mulch for the flowers in the garden overlooking the city. They even have a chocolate river in the town. In order to cover the length of Cape Hatteras, it is necessary to travel by ferry. This long string of sandbar islands, also known as the Outer Banks, extends off the Carolina shore. At Kitty Hawk, the Wright brothers sought freedom from gravity.
Brothers realized, even before the turn of the 20th century, if they were to ever conquer the air, that they would have to have stronger prevailing winds than those that existed in Britain. But that wasn't all they wanted. They wanted softness of soils that would cushion them in the event that they were to fall in their gliders.
Behind the Ranger looms Kill Devil Hill, from which the brothers conducted their glider experiments. These small buildings served as workshop, hangar, and home for Orville and Wilbur. The pantry is stocked with food typical of the 1903 era, even to the labels on the cans. This marker indicates the end of man's first heavier-than-air flight. It lasted 12 seconds, covered 120 feet. The fitting memorial to the Wright brothers at the top of Kill Devil Hill is suggestive of flight. The original plane is now at the National Air Museum, a part of the Smithsonian Institution. A century-old brick lighthouse warns of dangerous shoals offshore. Several old wrecks lie half buried in the sand. The age is suggested by the wooden pegs in the hull. A whole bunch of seagulls follow the ferry. In flight, the seagull is the very essence of freedom. In the evening, a fisherman heads for home. The Atlantic side is restless. All is quiet, looking towards the distant mainland in the area of Nag's Head. The top of the lighthouse presents a view of unspoiled beach that stretches for miles in each direction. A park ranger, clad in t-shirt and white shorts, explains the wonders of the sea. Using a small dip net, he gathered aquatic creatures and explained their habits and life history.
We're standing on the beach at Myrtle Beach, North Carolina. The sands are a soft gold color, the sky is bright blue, the sun is brilliant, the ocean light gray out but blue closer in. The waves are coming in rhythmically. making patterns of white lace with their foam on the edge of the beach, making big rolling breakers as they beat in and booming as they hit the sand.
We planned our trip to include South Carolina, the 48th state in which we had traveled. The moss on the live oak trees gives a feeling of the old South. The crops include peanuts, tobacco, and cotton. In this unusual store, cannon towel seconds are sold by the pound. The owner of this house makes a living selling tomatoes. As a sideline, he raises two-headed mules. Motels attempt to outdo each other in their advertising. An important stop on the Freedom Trail is our nation's capital. The best way to see Washington is to take advantage of the free parking on the mall, wear comfortable shoes, and walk to the nearby federal buildings. Of special interest is the Smithsonian Institution. Lindy's Spirit of St. Louis is on display. Also, a full-size model of Mariner IV, our long-distance space vehicle. In the new historical building is a full-size steam locomotive. Franklin's original press, and inaugural gowns from Martha Washington to Jackie Kennedy and Lady Bird. The National History Building houses a striking mineral collection, even the closely guarded Hope Diamond. We had lunch in the new historical building with my sister and her husband, both teachers from Topeka, Kansas. The National Gallery of Art contains many valuable paintings, American and Old World masters. An entire room is devoted to Goya, the most important Spanish artist in the 18th and 19th centuries. The cornerstone for the National Capitol building was laid in 1793 with Masonic ceremonies, George Washington taking the principal part. The Capitol dome is the second largest in the world, exceeded only by St. Peter's in Rome. The Capitol tour wasn't much fun for this little girl, who was explaining to the guard that her mother is lost. Outside, Vice President Humphrey's limousine waits at the curb. The great Corinthian columns of the Supreme Court building easily identifies this structure. The telephoto lens shows the detail of the facade. The National Archives serves as a depository for the most important permanent records of the federal government. The Declaration of Independence, Constitution, and Bill of Rights are sealed in bronze cases filled with helium. They can be lowered to a fireproof, bomb-proof vault at a moment's notice. All of our presidents have lived in the White House except Washington. Even he approved the site. It contains 132 rooms and 20 baths and showers. The lines for visitors are long, but move rapidly. cameras are not permitted inside. The Washington Monument symbolizes the nation's respect for the integrity and high ideals of George Washington. The tallest masonry structure in the world, it is 555 feet high. From the top is a magnificent view of the Federal Triangle and the Capitol Building, 2 miles distant. Thomas Jefferson once said, "I have sworn upon the altar of God eternal hostility against every form of tyranny over the mind of man." In this temple, as well as in the hearts of the people for whom he saved the Union, the memory of Abraham Lincoln is enshrined forever. Here, on a beautiful hillside, in front of the Curtis Lee Mansion in Arlington Cemetery, burns the eternal flame which marks the final resting place of John F. Kennedy. The stone markers are for infant Kennedy children. The National Masonic Shrine is in nearby Alexandria, Virginia. It contains a Shriner's Fez from every temple in the country, and the chair in which Washington sat as master of his lodge. A trip to the Washington area is not complete without a Chesapeake crab dinner. The easiest way to go sightseeing in New York is by Gray Line bus. We were guided by Paul Donna, a retired Broadway actor. Using impeccable English with a New York accent, he was very nostalgic about the disappearance of the old landmarks.
Perhaps by chance, perhaps by design, but I rather like to talk, especially about New York.
The Empire State Building, 102 stories, is 1,470 feet high, including the huge TV antenna, which serves all of the New York stations. From the tower, we see 2 ocean liners at dock. The vacant area is Central Park, the most valuable park property in the world. A drive through the canyons, past modern slum clearance apartments, to Chinatown. The Episcopal Cathedral of St. John the Divine has been in the process of construction for 50 years. When completed, it will be the largest and most impressive in the world. The ferry still takes people to Liberty Island for 5 cents. The Statue of Liberty, conceived and designed as a gesture of international friendship, has become the symbol of the ideals of freedom. The boat trip, which circles Manhattan Island, starts near the ocean liner dock at 42nd Street. The 35-mile trip passes under numerous bridges and completely encircles Manhattan Island. The 19-building New York Medical Center. 10% of Manhattan babies are born in the tan building on the left. The Colonial Building, nestled in the trees, is Gracie Mansion, built in 1799. Recently, the traditional home of New York chief executives. Dr. Emerson Fosdick's Riverside Church, one of the largest in New York. The gleaming white Soldiers and Sailors Monument in Riverside Park honors Civil War dead. An interested spectator on the boat is this attractive girl from Pakistan. The city bus takes us through the Lincoln Tunnel to the subway, which in turn takes us to downtown Manhattan. The lower plaza in front of the RCA building features the flower garden and the statue of Prometheus. On the opposite side of the building is Atlas supporting the world. On a tour through NBC studios, I see my favorite TV star. Radio City Hall features the famous Rockettes. Across the street, in St. Patrick's Cathedral, a wedding takes place during visiting hours. The Metropolitan Museum of Art is the largest in the Western world. It contains countless art treasures, paintings by the old masters, Rosa Bonheur, Goya, many others, Queen Hatshepsut in the Egyptian section. There is also a hall of Grecian and Roman statuary, a porcelain dog, and plate. We leave the conventional Metropolitan Museum to visit the Guggenheim Art Gallery, designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, which exhibits modern paintings on a circular quarter-mile ramp. A must for New York visitors is a tour of Macy's, world's largest department store. It features a bargain counter at the Broadway entrance. A more sophisticated area displays gold-plated cabinet hardware. This tired shopper's husband will never be troubled with ulcers. Saks Fifth Avenue was closed Saturday afternoon, but window shopping is still in order. On the Lower East Side are the open-air fruit markets. This fellow with the message is sitting on his soapbox. A brownstone building has been sliced in half, exposing fireplace chimney flues. The Washington Arch is the entrance to Greenwich Village, a haven for artists, writers, beatniks, and hamburger shops. The shop windows feature gaudy jewelry and knickknacks. We don't leave this slide on quite long enough for the slow readers. The sunsets of the western canyons have a quiet beauty. But the red sunset of the canyons of Manhattan has special charm. There are more theaters in this 2-block just off Broadway than any other place in the world. Times Square is busy and brilliant at night. A mounted policeman heads for his beat. A Howard Johnson in this location is surprising. Animated signs bring movement to the scene. The news is presented on the new Allied Chemical building. The United Nations is composed of the Secretariat building, the General Assembly Building, and the Meeting Hall. Here are assembled the representatives of the nations of the world, dedicated to the ideals of peace and freedom. In spite of their urbane existence, there is a feeling for nature and the soil among New Yorkers. They even grow trees on their rooftops. When city life becomes too pressing, they head north for the New England resort country. Families with their friends enjoy outdoor sports, such as boating on Lake Winnipesaukee, nestled in the New Hampshire mountains. Here, with the cool green and the beauty and wonders of nature, they find relaxation. Shopping for native handicraft in the world's largest basket store also offers diversion. The many flags which line the entrance and the Unisphere announce the theme of the New York World's Fair. The lines are long for the better shows. This couple doesn't mind. A Century of Progress in the Home is featured by General Electric. The DuPont House of Magic is colorful. The giant capsule, hurled aloft by a mighty rocket engine, is a contrast to the first Russian Sputnik. An unusual tower at the United Arab Republic building marks the spot where the Dead Sea Scrolls are displayed. Several foreign buildings offer attractive gifts for sale, and pretty girls attending. At the IBM exhibit, a moving wall of people and a computer stating the exact U.S. population at the moment. The beehive structure, viewed in panorama, marks a food stand. In the Catholic building, visitors are inspired by Michelangelo's Pieta, a masterpiece of art. The Belgian village, the Chinese temple, an ancient Oriental art. The Twin Towers of the New York exhibit offer spectacular views. Many opportunities lend themselves to the photographer. The Mexican building is especially colorful. A daring aerial exhibit with ritualistic significance is presented several times a day. Also, a guided tour of their art treasures. Benjamin Franklin, symbol of liberty and discoverer of electricity, introduces our series of night pictures. The Freedom Trail has led from the reality of liberty for a tiny settlement to a dream of emancipation for the entire world, from independence for 13 colonies to world leadership by 50 states. May the blazing route to the future always be a trail of freedom.